Okay, so this one's going to be kind of a doozy. What happens is that the script is so big that I'm still writing it right now, so I have no idea how long this is going to be. And there's a double combo of the fact that the footage that I managed to record using the PlayStation Share system is garbage. I have no idea if it was the internet's fault, the PS4 server's fault that are probably overloaded, or even my fault. I have no idea whose fault it is, but the footage is garbage. A lot of the time it is full of artifacts. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep the footage while I speak as context for what I'm talking about, but all of my points are going to be made by audio alone. They are baked into the script, so if you want to listen to this as pure background noise, that's fine. There's a completely fine way to experience this, and you're going to get the full experience of whatever mess is this one. So, okay, let's begin this right now. Back when I did the Resident Evil 3 Remake video, oh so long ago, like 3 weeks ago at the time of writing the script, I had in mind a section similar to the section in my Catherine full body review. In the Catherine review, I talked about what the difference between a remaster, an updated re-release, and a remake is, and talked about what made it such an effective updated re-release compared to the original game, and I had something planned for the Resident Evil 3 review as well, but then the game fried my brain, so I forgot about that. Still, we are living high in the remake era, with Resident Evil 3 being remade, Final Fantasy VII being remade, Trials of Mana being remade, all receiving back-to-back remakes that are being released. Wonderful 101 is getting a remaster soon, so I suppose there is no shortage of opportunities to talk about those topics. So let's talk about what I think a good remake is, and what I think of Final Fantasy VII as a bit of context before we dive into the experience. To me, the formula for a good remake is simple. It's to pick up the original game, plus better graphics, plus quality of life changes, and maybe a side dish of extra content and or changes that still fits into the game's original design, and that's it, you got a good remake. You personally might think this is boring, you might rightfully think that this is just a remaster, and you'd be right, and I feel like I wouldn't have much of an argument if we didn't have in existence a perfect example that encapsulates all of that I look for in a remake, and that's the Resident Evil remake, the first game's remake. Resident Evil is the same game with better graphics, extra mechanics that enhance the survival horror, but it's still the first Resident Evil game, not only at its core, but at everything else as well, even from a superficial perspective. So while you might prefer the original PS1 release if you have a personal reason to do so, and there's nothing wrong with that, I personally think there is absolutely no good reason to not recommend the remake to anyone wanting to experience it for the first time. Hell, it's even a good entry point to the entire franchise, what with the HD release looking very pretty and a plethora of difficulty options, so even the most casual fans can get into it without worrying too much about getting stuck to the game due to the game's harsher mechanics. Like for example, the additions to the remake of the Crimson Heads that forced you to juggle gasoline to burn corpses or aim for headshots on top of all of the original stuff, and man, it's just way too good of a remake. And there are many good changes, but this is not a Resident Evil remake video, this is a Final Fantasy one, so I can't get all of them out right now. You could even say that the remake surpassed the original. Not only there is no need to go back to the PS1 version if you don't want to, you are getting a better version of the same deal. Remake is, not objectively, but subjectively, in my opinion, remake is just the better game. And the same, for better or for worse, cannot be said about the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I played Final Fantasy VII for the first time 5 years ago. That's maybe not fair. It was probably between 4.5 to 5 years ago. Well, it was not long enough for me to develop childhood nostalgia, but just long enough that, hey, maybe a remake would be cool. But I knew Square Enix would never be true to the original's gameplay, because I know Square Enix at this point. And the moment they revealed that Kingdom Hearts ass looking gameplay, I knew the game was going to be shit. I just fucking knew the game would be shit. They could still have the same characters, but it was going to be 100% shit. I knew they would fuck up the wall market and that Cloud wouldn't cross-dress. I knew the character designs would be modified to be more modest for modern audiences. I knew they would do the fucking thing in Kingdom Hearts 3 where you spend all of your MP and must wait for the bar to refill from 0 before casting spells again, regardless of how much MP you had, even though I hadn't played Kingdom Hearts 3 yet, because holy fuck, what the fuck was that shit? Who thought that was a good fucking idea? Fuck off this shit. I'm the opposite of hype. I'm fucking done. I was just fucking done. Now, I don't know if you personally have been following Final Fantasy VII Remake news, but if you did, you'd know I was being a complete prick. I was being a complete asshole about things, because I turned out to be wrong about a lot of things. And eventually my rage subsided, mostly because you just can't rage 24/7 for years without getting a heart attack, but also because the game started looking actually good the more it was revealed. The designs weren't getting changed wildly, plot points seemed to be the same ones. At some point Square Enix ethics departments got involved and stuff seemed to go down, but just take a single look at the Honeybee Girls and tell me if any ethics department got involved. They didn't. Just look at them when you get the time, if you're not looking right now. But they had their priorities right, if the ethics department was as powerful as they say. But the gameplay is still shit, because no company except for Atlus and Firaxis got the balls to commit to turn-based gameplay, even though technically ATB isn't strictly turn-based anyway, but the gameplay is different, so it's still shit, right? Well, it's more complicated than that. Eventually I bought the game, or you wouldn't be here today listening to my rant, so let's get started with that. Forget a minute about the characters and the plot, we're going to dissect this step by step all the way through, but let's start with the gameplay. But let's get this out of the way first. JRPGs, they got a bad reputation among certain communities for being shallow entertainment. Not all of the communities, but amongst the more hardcore ones, there are a few that think that they are games where you just select, attack through a bunch of random battles and then maybe use spells in boss battles, and that's it, and it's all bad. And fuck those people, those are not reasonable people. And anyone who played a half-decent JRPG knows that is bullshit. But we must also admit that sometimes they aren't all that deep. And sometimes they are, but in unintuitive ways. And yet other times the true depth is hidden behind a mechanic that you have to go really in depth to bring the deeps out of it. But some JRPGs are happy to be easy affairs where going in depth will make you more efficient of a fauna killing machine, but otherwise they let you breeze through the main story, and others will only reveal their true difficulty at the post game, and some will just kick you in the balls or the ass or the breasts, not going to be like limiting, they're gonna kick you in the head until you completely master their mechanics. And then of course there is the matter of what comes before when it comes to a genre. Like, people who never played a JRPG have no expectations, but once you played enough, you expect more than just the classic attack, defend, magic, run commands of ye olden JRPGs. Unless they are Dragon Quest fans, but let's just admit right now that Dragon Quest fans aren't really a good measuring stick for most of the gaming population, since they have long since ascended to godhood. And when you take everything into account, we have to be honest with ourselves and just admit it that gameplay-wise, Final Fantasy VII wasn't setting the world on fire. It was a deep game, make no mistake, but that was mostly thanks to the materia system. Just look at all the crazy shit people do on YouTube, and you can see how much fun it is playing around with the magic balls combinations. But that was it. Limit breaks and other stuff were fun, and as a tool they were essential to some fun battle times, but they had appeared before in the franchise, and they were all built upon a familiar, well-trodden framework. The remake, however, doesn't fuck around. What at first looked like some kind of Kingdom Hearts weird abomination is in fact, and prepare for the hottest of takes right now, I think the battle system this time around is deeper than the original battle system. In the remake, you move, you guard, you dodge, and you attack in real time, all very basic actions. But in fact, they do almost nothing. In order for you to really get into it, and in order for you to really make a dent in the enemy, you are going to have to use skills and magic and items, but you can't do any of that in real time. Because to do that, you must spend at least 1 ATB bar, 2 in the case of the most powerful skills. But wait, you ask, what is an ATB bar? If you play the original, you might be even thinking spending an ATB bar? What exactly is the ATB bar this time around? Well, the ATB bar is a bar that fills up as you attack. It technically fills up really slowly and it only goes faster as you attack, but if you don't connect any attacks, it feels incredibly slow, so you must connect the attacks. And the bar is split into 2, for a maximum of 2 possible actions back to back, or 1 more powerful action that spans both bars. And you can also set materia that allows you to charge it by guarding the attacks. You get a skill that you can use to double your current amount of ATB, or you even get a limit break that literally breaks the bar into 3 segments, so you can charge an action faster or perform more consecutive actions when fully charged. Because while attacking isn't nothing, like I might have said, it still kind of is nothing, like I said. And using skills, items, and magic is absolutely necessary for survival and victory. What really makes this even better is the fact that all of the other bars are preserved exactly like you remember them. You still have HP, you still have MP, and you still have a limit bar, but now the ATB bar, instead of just being a meter of when you can perform an action, is an active resource that needs to be managed. Whenever you activate the command menu to use a skill, the game slows down to an almost complete pause. And this is so you can think and choose between a large number of available options, and also so you can order your party members to use their skills and items and stuff as well, since they won't do it without you specifically selecting them. Just how you'd expect from an usual party to behave in a turn-based JRPG. They are also kind of brain dead, and they attack really slow on the same rhythm as the enemy, which is really slow. So jumping from character to character to charge their ATB bars so you can use a command when necessary before jumping back to your main attacker becomes a must in a few battles. A lot of the later battles. Not to mention the fact that characters can interrupt your attack mid-animation, thus causing you to lose the ATB plus any extra resources, so timing is of the essence, and on top of all of that, you must be careful about positioning in order to hide from homing attacks and other area of effect bullshit. And on top of all of that, each character gets their own little gimmick real-time attack that isn't affected by any of the other systems and work on their own, like Cloud being able to switch attack modes and Barret being able to charge his arm for a big bang shot. Not to mention the fact that aerial and ranged enemies are properly placed within a 3D space right now, so long-range fighters like Barret get their own time to shine as they are worth their weight in gold. On top of all of that, man, I'm saying that a lot, but on top of all of that, the materia system returns, with different weapons that have different slots with different layouts and connected slots that allows for special effects by combining different materia and all of that good shit. Including some of my favorite classics like the steel skill materia, plus a weapon upgrade system so Squeenix can include something to compensate for the lack of weapon variety by allowing you to customize each individual weapon, even if the weapon variety actually is pretty good this time around. Not that it wasn't in the original, but for like something as small as Midgar, the variety and the way it works with the new system is actually really good, since each of them comes with their own individual ability. Now let's go back to being real here and allow me to say this. This ain't the classic JRPG 3 characters in a row system, and it doesn't invalidate the original game nor substitutes it, but it is a good system nonetheless, and I have to give credit where credit is due. Work was put into making this into a good system. just brain deadly mashing through the game is impossible on anything above easy. Hell, I doubt you won't die even on easy mode if you don't pay attention. And the cherry on top is that the game now has stagger / stun mechanics because of fucking course it does. It's basically mandatory to every JRPG these days apparently. And while in normal battles, stunning enemies is just a matter of using the elements they are weak to, bosses are much more involved affairs with unique staggering mechanics and parts that can be broken or severed, and they are all these long as hell multi-stage behemoths that always serve to cap off the story high points with a healthy dose of awesome, even if at the end of the day the fact that almost every boss is this grand spectacle means that, ironically enough, it might be hard to remember each one individually, because when every boss battle is the best boss battle, turns out none of them really are the best boss battle, or are they? Which, honestly, it's by far the best fucking complaint to give to a game, hands down. Imagine just walking and saying, hey, your game's boss battles, they are too good. They are so good, I can't even remember all of them because of how good, spectacular, and long they are. That is, hands down, good work. It was a job well done. No complaints here. And the summon system also returns from the original 7, though thankfully it is not the dumpster fire that it was in 15. Well, but it's still kind of weirdly limited like in 15. You can just summon them at any moment by spending large amounts of MP. No, this time around you can only summon them in specific long battles. Be there extremely tough battles, 90% of the time they are boss battles. You can only summon them on boss battles. But you don't just summon them for an attack and they go away forever. No. Instead, what happens is that you can summon them by spending 1 bar of ATB from any character that has like the summon materia equipped on them. Oh, and by the way, the summon materia, it's their own slot that every character only has one of. You can't equip it on any slot. But anyway, you spend 1 bar of ATB and you summon the creature that is going to help you. But it doesn't just do the attack and go away. It actually becomes a 4th temporary party member that you cannot control directly for normal attacks, but that you can spend an ATB bar from any character, even those that didn't summon him, for it to use special attacks, which makes it much more engaging, much more controllable, and much more strategic in what summon you want to use, as well as how that summon is going to fight. It gives you a lot more control than 15, and it also gives you a lot more control than the original 7, where it was just one big fancy attack, but it also weirdly limits you in which fights it can be used. At the same time, if you could use it for every fight, for every battle, you could essentially win every single battle easily against normal enemies using it, not to mention the ridiculous long amount of time it takes for the bar to show up and start charging also means that the battle would be incredibly extended to compensate for it. Well, I have no real solution for this problem, so I'm gonna go and say Square Enix also did a good job on the summon system, if only because of how powerful it is. Oh, and by the way, you still get your super fancy attack. When the summons bar that charged, it starts G-charging, it starts slowly emptying it itself. And when it reaches 0 and the summon is going away, it launches its ultimate attack. So yeah, you still get a fancy long battle animation to watch. And as always, it's a joy to watch. Square Enix is... sometimes they make very weird gameplay decisions, but their games are always a joy to watch. Of course, I'm not just going to keep patting Square Enix in the back forever, so let's talk about the few kinks there are. Namely, the characters being so slow that and dodging covers so little ground that you're better off just betting on guarding every single attack you want to avoid and hope that this attack doesn't pierce your defenses. And then there's the fact that you will be constantly switching materia between characters as you find new materia, and also you switch to new characters, but the game has no option to save your materia settings, which would have saved a lot of time. And then there is that they put on a mode in the game labeled Classic, that is a difficulty mode. But what happens is that, all that happens in that mode is that the characters attack automatically and you still do the ATB stuff. which is a huge fucking middle finger to fans who expected an actual classical experience. There was no need to put a mode labeled like that and pretending that this is the classical experience. Even if no actual malice was involved, the system is still good. The gameplay, the battle system is still good despite all that. It works, it has depth, and I enjoyed it. So, congratulations Square Enix, you made me regret all the venom I spit on your direction when I first saw the gameplay. Even if none of that was public and I didn't even said anything to my non-existent friends, but yeah. Let's move on. So let's put all of that behind us for now and go to the next step. Let us focus on the story. And on this particular topic, I have quite a few negative feelings, unfortunately. But let's start with the positive stuff. The characters. The characters you know and love are still here, and they are not the abominations from most of the compilation. I mean, there were quite a few parts of the compilation that were good. I think Crisis Core comes immediately to mind. Everybody loves Crisis Core. I think that's a broad statement. I'm sure not everybody does it, but a lot of people do. But the bad parts, the mischaracterization, the weird stuff that makes no sense, even more than the original game made no sense, they're not here. Cloud isn't a dark, brooding, sad boy. No, he's a reserved, socially awkward, tryhard, who, the moment where his mask starts cracking and showing signs of genuine emotion that hints at his backstory, are the best. And Tifa is the energetic tomboy childhood friend who has a few qualms with all the whole terrorism thing because Cloud is a mercenary now working with a terrorist group, basically. And Barrett is fucking awesome, and he has no qualms about the terrorist thing at all. And in fact, let's stop right now and talk about how awesome Barrett is. Barrett is a leader, but he's not your usual calm, composed, reasonable, sometimes old-bearded good guy like you see in quite a few Japanese media. No, fuck that. He's the equivalent of a 30-year-old hot-blooded shonen protagonist with a chip on his shoulder about the planet being slowly bled dry by a giant, corrupt corporation. And what do you think he's gonna do? You think he's gonna sit around and complain about it on Twitter? Fuck no! He's going to lead a terrorist cell and bomb the shit out of those corrupt assholes, all while doing grand hot-blooded speeches about how fucking awesome his team is, and how he's going to lead them to save the entire planet, and that they can trust and put their burden on his back and stuff, and how to help make a brighter future for his daughter, who he loves very much. He's a man I would follow to the grave. He's awesome, he's amazing, he's the best character. He was already the best character, and here he's expanded in ways that doesn't ruin his character, it just makes him better. He's just the best character in the entire game. I love his personality, I love playing as him, he's the best. Oh, and then there's Aerith, who is still the sort of innocent but not really kind of quirky girl that can kind of sees the future, of course. There is Red 13, who I won't spoil, but if you play the original, he is Red 13. And the Shira executives are all assholes, so you know, everything's perfect. They also expanded the role of Biggs, Wedge, and Jessie and made them into pretty likable characters, while expanding their characterization and adding details like Biggs helping out an orphanage that is close to Aerith's home, Wedge takes care of stray cats, and Jessie's career as an actress. She used to be an actress, and this all adds a sense that they were really born and raised in this world and that they didn't just pop up one day to forward the plot alone. And I gotta say, after playing so many games where writers thought having characters be snarky, sarcastic assholes to each other is actual good writing, which is a line even games I played more recently like Resident Evil 3 tread dangerously close to, the cast of Final Fantasy VII Remake is fantastic. They are lovable goofballs who have enough personality to stand on their own on the more serious moments of the plot as well, but they aren't all serious, sarcastic, I can't be genuine, I have to be constant ironic assholes. No. The main cast of this game is the kind of people I would love to run into in real life and spend some time with. And the villains are all people I would like to eject immediately out of an airplane if I met them in real life. So, as far as character writing goes, it's all pretty great. And if you came here for the character writing, it'd be weird if you came only for that, but if you came only for that, you're going to leave more than satisfied. If you never played Final Fantasy VII before, this is also a great introduction for the characters. They are great. The character writing is on point. I wish I could say the same about the plot structure though. If you played the original game, then the plot beats you know and love are all here. The bombing of the reactors, falling through the church roof, the wall market, the fall of the big pizza in the sky, and of course the infiltration into Shinra HQ are all present and accounted for. Every plot beat from Midgar that is important to forward the plot, the character development and the themes of the game, it's all there. It's all here. Assuming, of course, it wasn't straight up expanded instead. It probably was expanded upon. Many things are expanded upon. Places that were only a few screens are now full-fledged JRPG villages with side quests and things to do. All tailor-made to showcase the game's new art direction. And I gotta be honest, it's a surprisingly good direction. They couldn't, or well, they could, they always can, really, but they decided not to go one-on-one, one-to-one, using the same artistic direction from the original game, which, given the different camera scheme and the way you navigate through the environments, yeah, it was probably a good decision, but I gotta admit, I do love the old school 90s OVA cyberpunk style with glowy bits everywhere. But they decided to go for a more realistic approach, let us say. Not that that is necessarily a bad thing, there's still a level of aesthetic exaggeration that you can point at and say, yup, that's a Final Fantasy game. The slums still look like they were made from trash dumped from the upper plates, the reactors look all properly sci-fi, but perhaps the biggest change for me was the little time we got to spend on the upper plates. You see, I did some research, and turns out the original setting for Final Fantasy VII was going to be New York in 1999, which ended up instead becoming Parasite Eve. But it is good to see them going back to the original plan and making everything in the upper plates look like New York in the 1950s. Old-timey looking cars and everything. And yes, when I was writing this bit, I confused New York in the 90s with New York in the 50s, and I regret abso-fucking-lutely nothing. Still, look at this, it's a typical suburban 1950s American-style neighborhood, but it has giant metal pipelines of doom all around it. I love it. Most of the time, I love this game's sense of aesthetic. It is inspired by the crazy mashing of cyberpunk with modern and fantasy conventions of the original game, without copy-pasting one-to-one the original game, and I enjoy that. And this is an expanded area that was not available in the original game, so obviously that means that the added content is great, right? Well, to put it simply, no. Most of the added content is padded. This game is at best a 15-hour game, padded to become a 30-hour one. It is double the length it should be. It is padded by horrible sections where nothing happens. It is padded with boring cliché side quests that you don't want to do, but you probably will because you want the XP and the materia. It is padded with entire dungeons themed around places that were only one screen in the original version, and the whole game suffers for it. Since each important plot beat that keeps the story going is several hours apart, divided by shit that just doesn't matter. If someone who never played the original played this game and they lost the way they forgot a plot point at any given moment, I would 100% forgive them, because by the time something happens, it will always have been at least 2 to possibly 4 or 5 hours since the last important thing actually happened. It's absolutely ridiculous, and I can give you some concrete examples right now. There are now 2 G-Bike segments and they're both padded to hell. The ending escape from Shinra feels ridiculous on how it keeps getting over the top and introducing new bosses during it that makes it feels like it never ends. And in the second bombing run, Cloud has to escape through the train tracks in a 1-hour segment where he, Barret and Tifa just walk through train tracks, occasionally stopping to do the exciting action of walking through tight grey corridors to get to another train track. And after all of that, they end up just below the plate, on top of some walkway that looks like they go into the horizon with walkways, and you gotta do the exact same thing again on another samey location for another hour or so, and this is just ridiculous. This is blatant unfun padding to make the game reach whatever Nomura or his co-director or whoever in Square Enix thought it was a reasonable game length for a standalone title RPG. Making the game Midgar only was probably a mistake from the get-go, considering it was just a 5-hour long segment of a 40-hour long game. But you probably already heard that argument, so let's just skip a bit ahead to the next bit of criticism. But thankfully, next one is a bit more of a positive one. It's about the WoW market. We cannot talk about changes without talking about the WoW market, which was significantly changed, and yet it's still pretty much the same place in spirit. Hell, the WoW market chapter to me is definitely the best chapter in the entire game. Not even the climax of the entire game managed to surpass it, though that might be because I was just really tired of all the padding by the end, but I digress. The WoW market is fun. The moment you enter it, the lights dazzle you, the music is upbeat, and shit looks great. There's restaurants, a gym, a coliseum, and of course the Honeybee Inn is back, which is less of a weird, abstract gentleman's establishment thing, and it's more of a concrete hostess club now. If you don't know what a hostess club is, you should probably Google that. There's a lot of history and examples that I can't go into right now, but it might be interesting to you. The place has this maniac energy to it. The Coliseum battles in particular are so over the top, they feel like the best kind of anime tournament arc, all condensed to 40 minutes, ending in a spectacular boss battle against the Hell House of all things. The devs knew what they were doing here. Rather than removing the silliness of the original game, they pretty much put it first and forefront and exaggerated it like there's no tomorrow, and the WoW market is the best example of that. Aided by a greatly expanded cast of characters that shows the different facets of the WoW market, including a cowboy chocobo dude and a woman that she kind of has a message parlor that exclusively messages hands, I think, and I ended up doing her side quests as part of this chapter, and I'm pretty sure she just ended up taking Cloud's hand virginity, if that's even possible, plus Andrea, who just has to be seen to be believed. All of this amazing arc climaxes at a dense number, yes, a dense number, where Cloud has to prove that he has the moves to deserve becoming the prettiest princess. That's all completely 100% factual, and it's all great, and it's honestly a very completely 100% good chapter. Of course, all of those pretty lights and great times exist to hide the dark side of the WoW market. You don't have to wander far off the beaten path to enter dark alleyways where the music suddenly shuts off and all that remains is trash, homeless people, and vomiting men who had one too many shots. Not to mention the fact that the whole district is ruled with an iron fist by a corny, lovable, straight-up rapist called Don Corneo, who chooses who lives and who dies whenever he wants. He changes the rules out of nowhere to pit Coliseum combatants against hellish creatures, he blackmails the shit out of everyone, and of course, he sends people down to the sewers through a trapdoor, to be eaten by his monster pet. That is truly some classic villain stuff. Yeah. His essence is intact in this remake, and I'm glad they took the time to keep his dorky villain vibes, even if he is the scum of the earth. And also the Coliseum announcers that were so full of energy and good vibes during the Coliseum arc. Well, guess what? After Don disapproves of Aerith and Tifa, and he says, I don't want them, I want the cross-dressing Cloud, he lets the Coliseum guys basically bring Aerith and Tifa to a room where they plan to gang rape them. And speaking of that, later in the game, Hojo, during what is essentially a business meeting, tells everyone that he plans to get a bunch of soldiers, as in the class, the elite that Cloud participated in, wink wink, to gang rape Aerith, to break her mentally and get some extra ancient babies for test purposes. All of this after telling Aerith how he gleefully dissected her mother's corpse. So yeah. That's dark. Where's the ethics department when you need them? Ultimately, the point of this entire segment is not only to point out that this is the best chapter, but also explain why, because it doesn't matter if it is the upper plate versus the lower plate, or even the bright side versus the dark side of the people that live in the lower plate of the wall market, or even Shinra versus civilians. There is definitely this ongoing theme of people in power abusing the powerless all over the game. And the fact that the wall market is the perfect example of that in theme, while still being a fun, incredibly good vibe chapter. He's great both plot-wise and aesthetically. It's amazing that they pulled this off. They pulled this off with golden stars. Once again, I must say, this is a spectacular good job, and I give this particular part of the game a 10 out of 10. It's pretty good. So yeah, that was about as much positivity as I could spare for the main plot points at this point of the review. Sorry, we're gonna go back to shitting on the game everybody loves. Well, expansions and the big plot points aside, another notable change is that Sephiroth and flashbacks to the old game are fucking everywhere now. Everywhere, very explicitly. And I realized that the original game's foreshadowing was a little... no, okay, it was very vague, and I definitely appreciate the effort the writers took to make things more clearly signaled this time, but this ain't it, Chief. Sephiroth appears a fuckload of time in Cloud's mind. Cloud has PTSD almost every other chapter, and let's not even go into the fucking fate ghosts right now. We're going to go back to that, don't worry. But they went in really hard, as if to say, don't worry, those things you liked in the first game, they are coming eventually. Not in this game, because we fucked up and made this game Midgar only, but they're gonna come out eventually. And that's nice. That's really, really nice. But maybe we'd be less worried if you didn't shove in Sephiroth everywhere, and maybe if you let us know more of your vision for what the remake should be. Like, say for example, if you included more of the original game in this version of it, in this part of the remake, instead of just ending it on the Midgar escape, so we don't have just your word for it, so that we can actually have an idea of where you want to bring this. That assuming, of course, that you even want to go into this, but we are going once again talk to that later, don't worry. The weird part is that they do have good they do have good foreshadowing, like the hooded guys, that you know what they're about if you play the original game. Don't worry if you didn't play, but they basically now show up in multiple places, and a little Sephiroth wouldn't have hurt. A little Sephiroth would have gone a long way throughout making the foreshadowing better, but man, this is not a little Sephiroth. This is not let's foreshadow a little bit more, a bit more clearly. This is like, let's fucking get an alarm and blare to everyone, hey, things are going to happen. Things that happened before, they might not be what they seem. Be on the lookout for our crazy awesome plot twists in 2022, maybe 2023, maybe 2030, but yeah, they could have done a better job at this. And now there's a personal nitpick of mine. It's a minor thing. I know it's weird to say, oh, it's a personal nitpick of mine, because it is a subjective, extremely subjective part of mine, because our reviews about our games and what they choose to focus is like incredibly subjective, but shh, let's not go into that right now. What I'm trying to say is, I acknowledge this is a small part of the game that bothered me, that is probably not going to bother everyone else, but it did stick out in my mind even after I finished playing it, and those are the character animations. Because unlike the original game, which was more cartoonish, it was you have to put a bit of imagination work into understanding what's happening. This time they go really, really realistic and really, really cinematic. The game decided to go full-on cinematic with big set pieces and explosions and falling things and stuff like usual, but not only in cutscenes like Final Fantasy games usually do, they do in gameplay. And there's like, the animations are actually rather awkward. Like at one point, clouds start falling during a cutscene, and when you go back to gameplay, for a split second, he's just falling straight to the ground in his idle animation. And it doesn't feel like the pieces connect. You know, when he brushes past people, the people just straight up, a lot of the time, I don't even remember if they acknowledge him. I remember them not reacting while he's right in their face. He doesn't have that idle animation where he brushes past people and push them a little bit, like in Assassin's Creed or even Yakuza, where you get these really neat animations where you feel the character's sense of weight. When they push people out of their way, you feel their sense of weight in the world. That's what I'm trying to communicate. But here it feels like Cloud has an incredibly thin, invisible force field around him at all times, separating him from the game's world. And that, I realize, is an incredibly nitpicky example, and a lot of other games do it, but the more stylized the game is, the more acceptable that is. When you try to get a sense of weight in a realistic world, that's when you start to get into that sort of trouble. And I know it's incredibly personal, but I just felt weird watching it, and it clearly shows some of the game's kinks of getting things almost right but not quite, because of the team's lack of know-how on how to accomplish the big cinematic story they want, outside of, funny enough, the cinematics themselves, which were and still are one of Final Fantasy's greatest points. They're amazing, no doubt, but when you try to apply the cinematic to the gameplay loop itself, to the gameplay loop, that's the wrong word, but basically to these walking segments and even to the action segments, when you have to add this sense of cinematic weight, yeah, they seem not to have much experience, or they didn't have enough time for that, and it kind of sticked out to me a little bit. Now we are gearing up to get into the real conclusion, the real nitty-gritty of the issues that I have with the game, but not right now, not yet. Before that, let's take a quick pit stop on the soundtrack realm. The soundtrack is amazing. One Winged Angel is in it, and admit it, you just wanted to know if One Winged Angel was in it, and it is an amazing arrangement. And you also get to unlock, by buying this sort of vinyl discs, you get to unlock alternative versions of all kinds of tracks from the original game, like a dance party remix of the Final Fantasy Prelude theme. You get a jazz rendition of the theme of Final Fantasy VII. You even get a dance rock Chocobo song, and you can play all of them jukeboxes that are sort of in different places in the game. So yeah, they didn't skimp out on the soundtrack. The battle soundtrack remixes are all fantastic, while still very recognizable, and the extra themes, let us call them that, they cover all kinds of musical themes for all kinds of different moments, and I don't think there will be any controversy surrounding the soundtrack. I think people will be mad about a lot of things in this game, but I think that nobody's going to disagree with me when I say that the soundtrack is amazing. Maybe. Hopefully. Or maybe not even that is sacred. But yeah, now it's the time. Soundtrack realm, we left it. This is the moment you've been waiting for. So far the game sounds good, maybe even great. It's padded and it has some missteps, but it hit the bullseye so much of the time that the mistakes, they are forgivable, right? Well, personally I don't think so, because it's time to go full spoiler. Everything so far was filled with spoilers, and I'll warn you from the beginning of the video that it was going to have spoilers, but this time around I'm going to discuss everything all the way to the very final moments of the game, and I'm also going off script. Oh yes, there ain't no getting off this train we on if you stay here and listen, and if you don't want to hear however many minutes left of this video that's going to get spent on pure ranting, you please close the tab, you pretend that everything that came before this was the entire review, and you move on with your day. You move on, because I'm sorry to say, this ain't gonna be pretty, and I'm pretty sure everyone involved will regret this, me included, but I need to get this off my chest, so here we go. It's time to talk about the Fate Ghosts. Okay, to sum up my feelings in a kind of short, too long didn't watch kind of way, all I have to say about the ghosts really is, what the hell were they thinking? And the first answer that comes to mind is that they weren't thinking at all. They just weren't thinking at all. And I know that sounds mean, but that was the first thing that came to my mind, that they weren't thinking about how this is going to affect the whole project in the future. but maybe that's extra mean, that maybe that's too mean to say. Maybe they were thinking and they made a tough decision, but the fact still remains that I don't think it paid off at all. And I'm going to spoil the whole ending right now. If you don't know, if I just warned that I was going to spoil the entire plot, and if you didn't know the ending, I'm going to spoil right now. The ending of this game is completely different from the way the Midgar section of the original Final Fantasy VII game ended. The characters reach the end of their escape from Midgar using the highways as usual, but then when they reach the end, Sephiroth appears and it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna leave this giant portal here, and when the characters cross this giant portal that they really have no reason to cross, they end up fighting the physical manifestation of fate itself. But you see, the physical manifestation of fate itself isn't just this big thing at the end. It had its agents appear all throughout the game, which are those fate time ghosts things. What those ghost things are that appear throughout the entire game, what they're revealed to be in the end, and what you might have guessed by their actions before, it's what happens is that at some points during the game, the story is going to diverge from the original game story, and the ghosts appear to make sure that the plot continues going the same way that the original game did. Which is absolutely fucking stupid. It's absolutely ridiculous. No other remake ever did this, and it isn't kind of like, oh, why no other remake ever thought of this? They didn't thought of this because it was stupid. Maybe there is a way to execute this very well that would leave me satisfied, and I would look at it and I would be like, oh yeah, that was actually a very cool way, but this wasn't it. This definitely wasn't it, and I'll tell you why. The Fate Ghost thing bothered me. They bothered me throughout the whole game. They were really pissing me off every time they showed up, which is a reaction I didn't see anywhere. Some people thought they were weird, some people thought they were poorly implemented, some people thought they were cool, some people thought they were very well implemented, and all of those opinions are 100% valid. But I don't think anyone in the internet expressed the opinion that I'm going to express right now. I'm sure people think, because I'm never the only one, but I'm gonna say they pissed me off. Every time they show up, they piss me off. And they piss me off because of the very specific nature of this remake. What happened is, when I started the remake, I knew some information before I started the remake, of course, but when I started the remake, I expected them to just keep the general plot and change a lot of things. But, to my surprise, they only expanded on things, like I mentioned. They didn't actually cut anything off. They didn't actually radically alter too many things. I can't remember a single thing that was too radically altered. I guess the honeybee inn was radically altered, that would count, but they didn't, and they kept nailing the hammer right on the head of the nail on every single, they kept doing a spectacular job on every single thing. Every single boss battle had moments that called back to the original game that you didn't expect them to do. It is ridiculous on how much fan service, on how much, hey, you played the original game, look at this cool stuff that there is in this game. It is absurdly a game that looks like and feels like it was made for fans of the original, and even doesn't provide context for a few things. Let me explain to you a few things. When you fight on the top of the tower when the plate is falling, this is going to make sense for people who played the original, okay? But I'm going to try to everything that I say from here on out was in the original, okay? So if you didn't play the original, just assume that everything I'm talking about was in the original. When you fight that metal boss and it divides the team between two sides of a bridge, that wasn't the original. When you fight and the plate is falling and you're fighting like the Dirks on top of the tower, they can cast, I don't remember who casts right now, but one of them casts triangle. I didn't see them actually casting, but they cast a triangle that closes on one of your party characters, and you have to switch to another character, and you have to destroy the triangle so the character can go back into battle, which is something that wasn't the original. You can become a frog, which is ridiculous, but it wasn't the original. Which is what I meant when I said they brought back even the most silly of things, even the most things that nobody would care, and things that might even clash. They didn't care, they brought it back. They knew that there was some value to that and to pleasing fans, or maybe pleasing themselves. I'm not sure what was their objective, but they brought back everything that you would expect. Hell House brought back and became a boss. That giant floating centipede-bodied fish thing from the Shinra building, if I remember correctly, they're a boss in Hojo's lab now, which is a full dungeon, which is a story for another day, I guess. But the point is, they brought everything. Even the most ridiculous things that you think they'd cut, they brought back everything. And I didn't expect that. I expected the remake to change things so much it would be unrecognizable. And I would be a bit pissed off about that. Okay, I'm not going to go and say, hey, if they didn't do this thing, then I wouldn't be pissed off, because that's bullshit. If in an alternate reality where they did things more to my liking, but they were 100% to my liking, I would still be pissed off until it became exactly what I wanted. So I'm not going to even throw the line, oh, they could have done this, and I wouldn't have been so bothered. I'll always have been a little bothered. But what happened here is weird, because they brought back all those things, they expanded on them, and I really thought that they wouldn't. I thought that the remake would be like completely different except for a few plot points, but instead, because of the way they just expand what already exists, they build upon what already exists, it really feels, even if it isn't, it's really different from the original game if you were to get it beat by beat, but yet beat by beat it feels the same way as the original game. It feels like they captured everything and just added padding between it, but it really feels like the original Final Fantasy VII, and in many ways that would make it for a gigantic good remake. Oh hey, you changed things, you made a new thing, and yet it feels so much like the old thing that you can point at that thing and say, yeah, that's a remake, that's worthy of being a remake. They nailed it so much. They screwed the combat a little bit, they screwed with the padding a little bit, but none of that ruined the feeling. And if the game was completely different, or if the plot was changed significantly, then I wouldn't be so pissed off like I was with the Fate Ghosts thing. I wouldn't. I would still be like, why even bother remaking a game if you're not going to capture the original feel of the game? I would have been bothered, yes, but I would have been bothered. I would have been disappointed, and maybe I would have picked it up and saw it and be like, oh, it's actually something new, and maybe I would have enjoyed it like something new, but I definitely wouldn't acknowledge it as a remake. But what they did here pissed me off even more. It made me seriously angry when I saw those things, because what they did is they made a beat-for-beat remake of some of the game's most iconic moments, and they shoved in those fucking ghost things everywhere, and it was ridiculous. And it is the most stupid looking thing. The game has to turn into a frog, and it didn't bother me so much as this ghost things, because their purpose in the plot is fucking bullshit. They're changing the game. They're changing the game completely. They made a one-by-one beat remake of all the most important scenes, and then they shoved in there. I mean, they don't show up on every scene. Sometimes they show up slightly before, sometimes they show slightly after, and they almost never affect the expanded scenes, because their purpose is to basically make sure the original scenes go into this direction that the original game went. But that is such a stupid fucking motivation, because they only show up because this game deviates from the original story. They are a solution to a problem the writers themselves have created by using shitty writing. They show up during the fall of the Plate of Midgar in order to make sure the plate falls. Why? All you had to do was, I beat the Turks, and then Rude, or the other one, god, I can't believe I forgot the name of the red hair one, he's so cool looking. He just like uses his little, it's not a tonfa, it's like the thing the police officers use. He just uses that metal thing he uses to beat people up, and then he just throws it at the bottom, and the plate falls anyway. You get the satisfaction of the cutscene of the plate falling, but you also don't need ghosts. That part where Cloud is like, he is not in the second bombing mission, but he needs to be, because in the original story, he was in the second bombing mission, but he got, like, fired. Barrett says, I don't need you as a mercenary anymore. So the Fate Ghosts attack in mass, like a fucking Dynasty Warriors level, and they just fought the slums in order, and they attack everyone massively in the main cast. I mean, they attack like an army in order to make sure that Cloud goes on the second mission. And what they do after this whole attack, after this whole sequence, this whole epic battle sequence you get with them, they make Jessie fall and hurt her leg so she can't go on the mission, so Cloud has to go. And that is so amazingly, I mean, it's a game with turning into frogs and Hell House, so you know it's already not a serious game, but it's so stupid. As a main serious plot point, it's so fucking stupid that they would go in army strength to make a girl break her leg slightly. And the worst problem is, you know what the worst problem about this is? It's that in the moment before, in the day, because this happens during like the morning after Cloud sleeps, and the night before, Cloud and Jessie and Biggs and Wedge go on a mission to the upper plate, and they have to go fast back to the lower plate so they can escape Shinra, and they use parachutes to parachute down. Why couldn't there be a slight parachute malfunction that hurt Jessie's leg so Cloud could go on the mission? I just fixed this. I just came up with this fucking thing while I was mad. I just fixed the writer's problem to make sure they can keep the expanded section where they go to Jessie's house, which is what happens before this, and Jessie hurts her leg and Cloud can still go on the mission. Why fate ghosts? Why fucking fate ghosts everywhere? And they show up everywhere, and they're so annoying because they like ugly the place, you know? That sounds like an incredibly petty comment, but they ugly the biggest moments because they just become walls and the characters can't pass through them, or they become extra battles where the story comes to a halt. And I think that's the problem. Yeah, I think talking right now, I understand ugly is kind of a weird word to use, but they halt the plot completely so you can beat the fuck out of them for absolutely no good reason. The padding already stretches the plot. They just halt, and in the most ridiculous way, goes flying everywhere, and nobody asks anything. Everybody just asks. I think Barrett makes a comment like, holy shit, there's some weird shit on these slums, but that's it. The characters don't acknowledge the characters notice them, but they don't question it. They just keep going plot by plot. Any other story that changed this wildly, the characters would go on a search to understand. Barrett would probably like delay the second bombing mission, or he would have a reason not to delay the second bombing mission in order to rush, which he doesn't. Instead, he just ignores the fact that the ghosts are fucking everywhere, and he's like, no, I'm going on the mission like they act like everything's normal, you know? Even if there's ghosts anywhere. And then at the second to last chapter, when they meet Red 13, they suddenly have the idea. They suddenly gather the insight that those ghosts are normal. Let's ask him what he is. And then Red 13 info dumps what the ghosts are. What the fuck was that? Why? Why are they even here? And this is the weird thing, are they here to justify? Because in the end, when they kill Fate itself, they are like, now anything can happen. And I'm like, oh, is this a setup so that the sequels are going to be different from this game? Is that what was their purpose? Because it is such a dumb reason for them to exist. Because no other remake, every time a book is adapted into a movie, scenes get left out. Unless it's a short book, unless it's like an adaptation of a short book or an adaptation of a short story, scenes get left out. The director may remix the order of the scenes, they may pick up two characters that are too similar and make it into one, make one character that is like, has to be in too many places for the story to follow correctly and just divide it into two, and in order to justify different things happening, they change up the story a little bit, but they just change the story, and then you release the movie, and then you can read the book, and then you can watch the movie, and then you can judge yourself what version is best, or if both versions do good things differently. They don't create plot reasons for why the plot of the original book is different. And I realized that is not a good comparison, because that is an adaptation of something from the other medium. Okay, let's talk instead about the Resident Evil 3 remake. There's different things in that. You don't visit the clock tower. Why don't you visit the clock tower? Well, you don't visit the clock tower because Nemesis just stabs Jill and Jill falls ill, and Carlos brings her to the hospital, and the hospital is expanded instead. Why? And did they have some sort of fate thing? Did Umbrella create a time-traveling tyrant in order to change the plot in the original game? No, they didn't, because they don't need to justify shit. It's a remake. It doesn't have to be 100% the same thing. It has to be 100% the same feeling, at least on the core, in my opinion. Otherwise, why bother make a remake? But it doesn't have to be the same plot beat by beat. It doesn't have to be the same levels. It doesn't have to have the same gameplay mechanics. So why the fuck would you justify that? It's just such a stupid thing to do. And the thing is, I can think of way better things to do instead of the Fate Ghosts. I can think of way better things. Like, for example, this I come up before I start recording, not right now, in the interest of fairness. But I thought, hey, why did they just have a G-Man character if they wanted to do Fate so much? Why didn't they have this character in the background that's like G-Man is for Gordon Freeman in the Half-Life series? Why didn't they do that for Cloud? Even better, why didn't they have Sephiroth do it? Why don't you have Cloud fight Reno and... God, is Reno the name of the guy? I was gonna say Rude and I just forgot, and I remembered the name and I forgot the name of the other guy the moment I reminded the name of the first guy. The Turks. When he fights the Turks and the plates are falling, why not have the vision of Cloud like clouds? Weird. Like glitches like it usually does when he has a PTSD attack. And he sees Sephiroth pressing the button on the plate that's about to fall, and he is like, oh no, he doesn't stop him because he's having the PTSD flashback and he can't believe it. And then suddenly it flashes back to reality and it's actually Reno or Rude that are pressing the button, and you're like, wait, what is happening? What is going on? And then you can start thinking, is the Sephiroth that Cloud is watching really real? You can have Sephiroth pop up in a bunch of moments, like it already does, but like, it looks like Sephiroth is screwing around with Cloud's mind, and you can have Sephiroth sometimes turn into one of the hooded guys. So it can be like, wait, is Sephiroth working through the hooded guys? Is what Cloud sees real? And you never know when Sephiroth is real or when Sephiroth is not real. And you don't know what exactly is going on. So when Sephiroth, in the end, he stabs Barret, and a time ghost like resurrects him, instead you can just have Sephiroth stab Barret, and you can have Cloud like fight with Tifa and Aerith, the Genova Dreamweaver, and then when the Dreamweaver is defeated, Barret is nice again. He's like, what the hell is happening, guys? Because it was the Dreamweaver that did this, and Sephiroth did this, and you don't know what is reality and what isn't reality anymore. And I just fixed the Barret stabbing scene without it being that is absolutely fucking ridiculous on the same sentence. You're welcome, or not. If you think I'm completely wrong, that's fine. If you think I'm just being an asshole, that's fine. But I personally thought I just fixed that scene. You don't even need a mysterious new G-Man character. Just use Sephiroth. You're already overdosing the game on Sephiroth. Would I have thought that was ridiculous? Yeah, I would. But that would be like, Sephiroth, man. He was already on the original game. I wouldn't be seeing all those fake ghosts and think that every time they show up, the directors just made a picture-perfect version of the scenes you so love. It's like a director. Those ghosts makes me feel like... not the director, okay? I'm not going to blame Nomura on this. I don't want to blame anyone personally, okay? I have no ill intent or ill will, weird, towards anyone who made this game. I have none of that, okay? I'm completely chill with those guys. I understand. I will throw some insight in why I think they did this towards the end of this rant. I might have some idea of why they did this, but as always, I can't be 100% sure because I'm not them, and I'm not going to throw Nomura under the bus and be all like, oh, he did everything. No, because there were writers, and he was just the co-director, and he didn't even knew he was going to direct this game before it was announced at E3. So I'm not gonna say it's the director's fault, but picture an artist, a painter, who creates the most beautiful paintings. And then one day he says, I'm going to I'm going to go back and I'm going to paint some of the paintings that I already did, but I'm going to use my new techniques in order to do it. And he paints it, and you think, oh, that's so beautiful. And then he's like, he's beautiful, right? But this painting actually has another meaning, and I'm going to show it to you right now. And then he just picks up a bucket of black paint, and he just throws it all over the canvas, and it's just fucking black paint everywhere. And you're like, why the fuck did you do that? And he's like, well, this is my new art. This is what I wanted to express. And you're like, fair enough. If you wanted to express that, that's your option to do. And as an artist, I respect your free will to do whatever you want. But holy shit, that was a fucking waste. That was a fucking waste of canvas. That was a fucking waste of colored paint. That was a fucking waste of black paint. And that was a fucking waste of your skill. You just ruined everything about the thing. You just picked up the thing that I love and you just shoved in something that constantly keeps appearing on the things that I love to do stupid shit that doesn't enhance it anyway. And as an artist, that's your option. And I'm sure some people are going to appreciate the deep details of the fact that this beautiful painting is now covered in black paint. And this is a terrible analogy. This is a terrible analogy. But you get my point. They picked up something the game delivered something I didn't know was possible to feel again. These feelings, and then they shat all over it. Like it was nothing. So yeah, that's why I don't like the Fate Ghosts, why I think they could be easily written into something else, why I think they are incredibly stupid and unnecessary, and I think they were off their rockers to think this was a good idea in the first place. Not to mention the fact that now that the ending is open and apparently Zack is alive again in another timeline and people that died are alive again in this timeline, maybe, because it's not explained, it makes you think, yeah, it's going to be a new adventure. It's not going to be a remake anymore. I should be excited. Except no, everything that's good in this game came from the original game. Do you think the only new ideas that he put... I mean, it has a few new characters, like Madam M and Chocobo Sam, which are great. But, like, the big main change that they did in order to change the fate and the plot is this fucking ghost fate thing that is completely bullshit and bad. And you can get excited and hopeful about the next chapters. I mean, I won't lie. I want to see where they go from here. I want to see if they're going to screw it up completely or if they're going to somehow manage to pull a win out of this, because maybe they will. I'm always forever hopeful. I'm never going to say it's never going to happen. But holy fucking shit, do you really trust the people? The ghosts are terribly written. The ghosts are terribly written. They have no, like, consistency. Sometimes they show up before an action is going to be taken. Sometimes they show up after an action is taken and fix it. Like, for example, they hurt Jessie's leg so she can't go on the bombing run before the bombing run starts, so Cloud can go on the bombing run. But then Sephiroth appears in the end and he stabs Barret in the chest, but there was like a fate ghost hidden within Barret. So after Barret stabbed in the chest and the world was already changed and everybody was like, oh no, Barret's dead, he resurrects him. And then Barret is all like, oh, I thought you were the bad guys, but thank you, fate ghosts. And then during the chasing, during the escape from Midgard, the fate ghosts appear again, and there's like this helicopter flying robot thing, and they throw it away, they defeat it, and Barret is like, I guess I have to thank them again. They weren't that bad. And then 5 fucking minutes later, after chase scene is over, Sephiroth, the bad guy, Sephiroth, appears. That was probably the worst pronunciation of Sephiroth, but he appears, and he's like, come and see the truth of things if you wanna fight and stuff. And he goes into the portal, and Eric makes a big speech about defeating fate and stuff. And then everybody's like, okay, I'm going to kill this thing that I don't understand. This thing that apparently hurt me, but just now saved me, and I don't understand. And the implications of this is going to be planet-wide. They know they are fighting fate itself. They know they are the arbiters of fate, the will of the planet kind of thing. And they have no reason to fight it right now. And they have no reason to believe this is the only place where they can change their fates. And they have no fucking idea what's happening, but they go into the portal and they trust Sephiroth, the guy who just fake stabbed Barret and was saved by and Barret was saved by the ghost, and they trust him, and they go and they fight the ghosts, and they fight Sephiroth, and the game ends, and they had no reason to do fucking anything about it. How do the ghosts know when to interrupt things? Are they omniscient or not? Because sometimes they appear too late, sometimes they appear too early. How do they know that Jessie needs to hurt her leg for Cloud to go on the bombing run? Why didn't they just mess with the parachute like I mentioned yesterday, so she could have a harsh fall, make the parachute stop a little bit above the ground so that she can still show up in the plate falling segment? Why didn't they do that? Well, I'll tell you why I think they didn't do that. It's because Nomura is about the spectacle. I have no idea why they... Oh, did I just throw Nomura under the bus? Maybe I did. Maybe I did. And that's bad. It's because Square Enix and Final Fantasy is all about the spectacle. They can just change a little thing. It isn't even Nomura's fault, really. It isn't even... It's Square Enix thing, it's Final Fantasy things to have big cinematics. They couldn't just have Sephiroth show up and do a little change. They couldn't just have a mysterious character show up and do a little change and that character be fate in the end and that character forcefully fight the characters so that the characters have no choice to defend themselves, thus making the story 10 times better. They couldn't. They had to have ghosts flying everywhere and becoming this massive fucking blight on the landscape because it is spectacle, and spectacle is life, spectacle is love. That's what I think happened. But when the Ultimania book came out shortly after the game was released, and they have an interview with Nomura and even Nojima, the scenario writer, who, if anyone, if you gotta blame anyone, you probably should blame Nojima, but you shouldn't blame anyone. You should have no ill will. And when I read that interview and they talk, oh, originally it turned out only Biggs would have, like, survived. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, Wedge survives when he should have died originally in the game, and then he shows up and he significantly, like, helps the characters before the fate ghosts show up out of nowhere and throw him out of a window. What the fuck? Why did they take so long to kill a guy who was supposed to be dead by the original script? And we don't even see his death. Everywhere else there's this spectacle, but he just fades to black and we hear a window crashing with the ghost carrying him, so we're supposed to just have this mental image that he got thrown away off of a window by the fate ghosts. What the fuck was that? I have no idea, but anyway, back to the interview. This is what happens when you don't have a script. Back to the interview. When I read the interview, I thought, man, these guys are nice guys. They had so much fun making this game and throwing ideas around, and that's why I have no ill will towards them. They are genuine people trying to make a genuinely good game. They're not trying to make another by the numbers games as service thing that shoves in microtransactions. They're trying to do, and I respect that. And I respect them. And I respect their product, even if I personally had many bad feelings attached to the product. Thanks to this thing. But reading the interview, they're like, oh, originally only Biggs was supposed to survive in the end and make the players think, what might be actually happening? But instead they started changing and turning around, and they started adding new scenes and cutting new scenes and cutting the new parts of the new scenes, and they were having such a good time doing it that they were like, oh, let's change this up a little bit, let's change it like a lot, but not too much, but like let's leave players thinking and a feeling. And remake doesn't just mean remake, it's going to be revealed and stuff like that. And they had fun with it. But from the way they speak, and I don't know if it's a bullshit translation or not, that Nomura himself said something along the lines of, the Final Fantasy VII you always knew and loved is still coming, it's still going to follow that plotline. Because if it is, a bunch of people are saying, no, that's bullshit, it's not, they changed the ending completely, how could it be? But there's a reason why they might be telling the truth, and why we might be getting an incredibly faithful adaptation, even if I myself think the odds are low. And the reason for that is that there was no big boss for the ending of Final Fantasy VII, of the Midgar section. Oh, of course there was a boss, but it wasn't the boss. It wasn't Sephiroth. It didn't have Fate. They needed to fight Fate itself, and they needed to fight God himself, and they needed to fight like a godlike deity, because this is a JRPG. Those are how JRPGs and spectacles work. So who cares if we fuck up the plot? Let's just add this little thing that maybe we can return to in the future, later, but focus on the spectacle right now. Which, if I'm correct, that is the most fucking Square Enix thing to do. That is the most Final Fantasy thing to do. Not necessarily. I know that Final Fantasy has good things and good writing, but that's like the most superficially Final Fantasy thing to do. Fuck the plot consequences. We need spectacle. We need the ghosts to show up constantly to show that they're a threat, because we need the spectacle of the ghosts. And then we're gonna pay off with a just giant boss battle, and then we are going to put in elements from the compilation. We're gonna have the guys from Final Fantasy Advent Children show up and be like the ghosts, and then we're gonna have, because we already have like Avalanche, the bigger Avalanche from Before Crisis show up, and we already have like the Leslie, the guy who is the helper, the bodyguard of Don Corneo. He's actually from a book, he's actually not completely new. We already have that shit, so we're gonna tie it even more into the compilation, and we're gonna leave a few doors open, but it's still gonna be the same thing. We're going to end like the unknown skies on the future, on the horizon or whatever, but that doesn't mean shit. Still gonna be fun at fucking Final Fantasy VII. We just wanted to fuck around and add a big finale, because this is a byproduct of trying to turn 5 hours into a full-fledged JRPG, including the god-killing boss battle. I'm not saying I'm going to go back to Fate and be all like, Fate got changed, and like make it a plot point in future games, and change a few things using that as justification, because that is a fucking weak ass justification. It's a remake, just fucking change things. And I think they know they could have just fucking changed things, but they didn't want to do just that. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to have the spectacle, they wanted to make a story that begins, has a middle and an ending in Midgar, even though it does not. And that consequence of that dissonance between what they were trying to do is what made the Fate Ghosts, and why they exist. That's what I personally think. And I think it could be completely true that the rest of the trilogy, the quadrilogy, the quintilogy might be. And it's going to be some fucking time before we do, because the second part is still in production planning phase. They are still planning what they're trying to do. They didn't even have an overview of what they're trying to do. And that might be another reason why the Fate Ghosts exist, because they don't know what they're going to do. They might not ever come back. The Fate Ghosts are dead. If they did a complete one-by-one remake of Final Fantasy VII with no changes at all, then people would be like, well, the Fate Ghosts were wasted potential, but wasted potential is all they could possibly be, because they're fucking dead and they can do whatever the hell they want. If they want to do a completely different story, they can. If they want to do the exact same story, they can. It doesn't even have to be a lie. They can completely do that. And if they did this all for the spectacle, without even thinking about how Fighting Fate is suddenly going to change the game's themes and story and plot beats and the way it goes, if they did this all in a superficial, let's have some fun and add some scenes that might pay off later or not because we have no plan, then, well, holy fucking shit. This might have been like, I don't know, it's not a waste of time. I like talking about it. It's really good, it's therapeutic. But yeah, it might have been a big change. We won't know, really, but if you bet, the greatest thing is that if you bet that from here on out, Aerith and everything that happens, I won't spoil what happened in case you don't know the rest of the Final Fantasy VII plot, but if the rest of the Final Fantasy plot goes exactly the same, the Temple of the Ancients, maybe they make Wutai, like you have to go to Wutai, you have to recruit Vincent at the Shinra Mansion, they aren't optional anymore. If they do that, then like maybe they will change that, but if they just go forward exactly like the original was, they can totally do it, because Fate is dead, but that doesn't mean like they can just like shove in a few little changes of little consequence and act like Fate being dead didn't just cause that and everything else is still exactly the same. They could do that. They could just do nothing with this plotline and it could have been entirely spectacle. And that would be the most fucking superficially Final Fantasy thing that they could have possibly done. And I have no idea, like, if this is a good thing or a bad thing. I just know that if this remake wasn't so close to perfect, I wouldn't be pissed off about this. It's so good that the parts that aren't good make the shit bad. That's ridiculous, but that's exactly what I'm saying. So I suppose the lesson we should take from this is like, if you're going to do something, you might as well not even try, because if you get a 9 instead of a 10, it's like infuriating, so you might as well not even try. And I hope that's not the lesson we get out of this. I hope the lesson we get out of this is that fucking anything could happen, I guess. Anything could happen, even everything that already happened. In that sense, that ending is the most open-ended way possible. So to the people who say Nomura is lying, it's not going to be the same thing, it can be the exact same thing. It can be a completely different thing. They really, because Fate is dead, and because it is dead, they can completely abandon the plot point as well going forward if they want to. They just completely erased everything that could possibly like here appear. But I will follow the game series. I won't necessarily buy the next part if they fuck it up. I don't like giving money to people who fuck it up, things in a way I don't like. But hey, I'm trying to think this on the positive side. I'm trying to think, hey, at least the next game won't have plot ghosts. And they couldn't possibly think of anything dumber than that. Right? Right? Please tell me they can't think of anything dumber than that. Please. Oh god. Oh god, I spoke too much. I'm gonna get some water. See you guys later.